there was a moment where me and my mom, we were sitting in church, and then all of a sudden my hearing started to go, and then my vision started to go. Before I knew it, my mom woke me up, and she's like, "What happened?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Oh, you're fine. That's normal to faint." And I was like, "What? You said that's normal? That's not normal." Boy, if I would have known now what I was doing then, I wouldn't be doing that. One of my coworkers the other day, I ended up posting a picture, and she's like, "That doesn't even look like you." And I'm like, "I know. Like, I feel like a totally different person." So you really notice while you're on a carnivore diet, the difference when you do incorporate that, all of a sudden your joint pains start coming back and your mental clarity starts to go away. And so it almost motivates you, like, okay, you see how you feel on that. So it motivates you to not try to incorporate that or cheat.
Okay, good morning, everybody. We have with us today Josh. Good morning.
Morning, everyone. Glad to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Good to have you here. Where are you located, Josh? It looks like you're in a library of some sort, standing a bunch of books. Where in the world are you?
I'm in Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm located in the library of the skilled nursing facility I work in. This area is pretty secluded and quiet, so I thought this would be a good place to set up.
Awesome. We can hear you well. Good for you. So you're working at a SNF there. I sent a lot of patients to those skilled nursing facilities for you kind of step them down. Couldn't get them. They weren't ready to go home and they left the hospital. But tell us a little about your background. Where does your story start?
All right. So my story is as a child growing up into my early 20s, I was a very morbidly obese child, very unhealthy, very chubby. And that, like I said, went into my early 20s. And until I started to get a little bit of health problems like sleep apnea, and the list goes on and on, lightheadedness and fatigue. And so I just started taking better care of myself, building better habits, and building a whole food diet, which the combination of all of that allowed me to lose a lot of weight. But that didn't necessarily mean my health got better. It actually, because then later on, actually found that I was having a lot of joint pain, and I was still having problems with mental fatigue and energy swings. And then I was getting a lot of nerve impingement in my lower back from weightlifting. And that's just to name a few, not to mention a lot of bloating and gastrointestinal issues. And it got to the point where I was getting irritated by it enough. And I love to lift weights, and I didn't want all of that to interfere with it. And I started to try the ketogenic diet, and initially had some pretty good results, but finding though it was very limited. And so I actually that's where actually YouTube started showing me a lot of your videos, and I come across a lot of your podcasts and information. I'm like, I was like, maybe I should give this a try. So I started eating a meat-based diet and found that pretty much all my joint pain went away. I had steady, smooth energy, and my gym performance went up. I wasn't having the nerve impingement in my back anymore, and it was like everything just changed just like that, just by getting rid of all the vegetables, seeds, nuts. And so it was a game changer.
Yeah, a couple interesting points that I think are just because one, we're hearing now that obesity is genetic, and you're like, I started out a genetically obese kid, some would say, but you're able to fix that by just going on diet and lifestyle. And it's like, well, maybe it's not so genetic. And then the next thing I would say, people say is the only reason you got healthier is because you lost weight. You lost weight, and yet you still had all these problems, and you had to change the actual composition of your diet, not just the calories in, calories out, but it was actually what foods you're actually eating and how they impact your body outside of weight loss, which I think is fascinating. I see that over and over again. I see people that are skinny that are sick, and we change their diet to, say, a carnivore diet, and now they get healthier. So it's not just about losing weight, and it's not that obesity is necessarily genetic. And you go back, well, the genetics 100 years ago were the same as they are now, and we didn't have all this obesity. So clearly, the type of food we're eating, the environment we're living in has this impact. Let me just maybe delve a little more back into the background. So you grew up as a kid. How obese were you? Because I can, at least from the chest up, you look pretty normal. You can't tell that you were morbidly obese at one time. But where were you at? Where did it start for you?
I ended up at my heaviest in high school, weighing about 330 pounds. And
At what
I mean,
height? At what height were you 330?
I'm 6 foot tall.
Okay, so you're a big guy for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was some muscle underneath that. Of course, you have to carry around that weight. Otherwise, yeah, that was about my heaviest. I've always been fairly big structured, but I was definitely, if I showed you a picture, yeah. One of my coworkers the other day, I ended up posting a picture and she's like, that doesn't even look like you. And I'm like, I know, it's like, I feel like a totally different person. So yeah, about 330 was my heaviest weight. And that was probably about when I was 18, 19 years old. And it wasn't until I was about 20 to 21 when I started losing weight and building a better lifestyle. And I lost about 100 pounds in a year. Just most of it was just walking every day, eating better foods, nothing really too complicated. But now I'm sitting around, I got down to about 190 pounds at one point, but I thought that was too small for me. So right now, thanks to Carnivore, I've been able to put on more muscle and I'm sitting around 210 right now. Yeah, and I'm pretty happy with that.
That's a solid size for 6 foot. I think that's pretty decent. So 330, was your family obese? Were your parents obese? What was a food environment like growing up? Is it the genetics is we're all eating the same food? I think we live in the same house and we're eating the same food probably. But tell me a little bit more about what you were eating as a kid growing up.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say my parents were morbidly obese. I would say they generally were a little bit overweight, but they weren't to the point of extreme by any means. But mom grew up on the farm, so she knows how to cook. So we ate a lot of bread, a lot of rice, a lot of potatoes, a lot of casseroles, a lot of noodles, basically ate similar to the standard American diet. And we included some vegetables here or there. We always had protein, but the problem is also mom would also buy cereal. And I remember I'd get into those cereal boxes and have like one or two bowls of cereal for a snack between meals. And boy, if I would have known now what I was doing then, I wouldn't be doing that. But yeah, so you can imagine we had lots of processed food in the house and we weren't starving by any means. We had plenty of food.
Yeah, obviously you weren't starving if you got up to 330 pounds. That's pretty clear to see. And so again, just for the sake of completeness here, so what other health at 330 as a kid? You see some people that are pretty big out there now, and they're still young and they're athletic and they're still able to do stuff and move, and you're quite impressed by that. But over time, that catches up to them. Had you started to develop, even as an 18-year-old, any sort of pains, difficulties, any kind of things that were coming along with that obesity?
As a matter of fact, earlier than 18, I would think it was about 12 or 13, I started getting every once in a while strains in my back, in my mid back, and it would just really limit me from being able to participate in sports for a few days and until it would heal up. And yeah, I was dealing with a lot of back problems already as a kid, which obviously didn't concern me at the time. But of course, now to this day, I developed mid back arthritis, but thankfully Carnivore has been able to keep the pain in the mid back to a very minimal, and the range of motion's gotten better. And so it doesn't affect my performance in the gym at all. But yeah, it was pretty shocking. Yeah. Even earlier than 18, I was developing some pain issues and can't remember at that age if I was getting any fatigue issues. I guess that you could definitely say I just wasn't aware of it. But also it limited how athletic I could be at that weight. I wasn't the most athletic kid in school. And of course, I'd usually get picked last on the sports teams during recess. Yeah, that's just a few to state.
Yeah, sure. And then, so at whatever you said, 2021, what prompted you to say, hey, I got to change this? Where did the motivation come from for that?
Yeah, it was a mixture of things. I was developing sleep apnea, and so I wasn't getting sleep at night. I was scared to go to sleep because when you wake up gasping for air, that's pretty shocking. So that prompted me, a little trigger in me. But then there was a moment where me and my mom, we were sitting in church and sitting in a church sermon. And then all of a sudden, I remember my hearing started to go, and then my vision started to go. And then before I knew it, my mom woke me up and she's like, what happened? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I basically fainted in church. And so luckily the ER was right across the street, and they examined me and they said, oh, you're fine. That's normal to faint. And I was like, what? You said that's normal? that's not normal. And then when I like to hunt and fish a lot, and we were out walking to a fishing spot, and I was just constantly getting bouts of lightheadedness. And so the combination of all of that was telling me maybe I should start just taking a little bit smaller steps. I started buying my own groceries, and I was working at that time in a warehouse, which was a lot of heavy labor. So that was giving me some exercise. But then the combination of that and then just eating a little bit better diet, I was losing weight without even knowing it until I went in for like a sinus infection and I was like 20 pounds lighter. I was like, what? That didn't make sense. And so I was like, let's keep going with this. And so I just made slow, gradual, better decisions in my food, and then started walking every day, developing good habits. And then, in a year, I lost 100 pounds and no one recognized me.
Yeah, I think that's something, obviously, we're here with this carnivore space and we promote that, but there are a lot of things that people are doing wrong. And sometimes getting rid of soft drinks or sometimes just making those easy changes can have pretty profound impacts. And I think sometimes, like you said, you can lose weight a lot of different ways. While you were losing the weight, I'm sure you started to feel better. And did you start exercising more? I said you started walking. Were you doing anything to try to maintain, because you'd mentioned as a big guy, you need muscle to be able to move. You actually, it's like weight training. You're walking around with an extra 100 pounds is like working out. In a way, your muscles have to get stronger or you become completely sedentary. And so, were you able to manage to hang on to much of that lean mass that you had developed as a kid?
Yeah, so obviously I was feeling better as the weight was going down. I didn't feel as fatigued with any sort of physical activity. And so from that aspect, yes, I was feeling much better. But after I was starting to plateau from walking every day, then I started running. And then after I started plateauing with running, I decided some of my friends like to lift weights, and I would a little bit in high school. But so I started lifting weights every day, going up to the gym regularly. My hometown had a little gym in the high school that you can get a membership for. And so I'd go lift weights with my friend and do that pretty regularly, just doing basic stuff, nothing too crazy, just doing squats and bench press and the basic exercises. And that habit and hobby of getting into weightlifting actually is what led me into my career as a PTA eventually. But I would say, though, when I did lose all that weight, that a lot of my lean mass did disappear some, not entirely, but it was some. But as I started weight training, some of that definitely started to come back. But it was never to the point where it is today, though, thanks to Carnivore.
Did you see a lot of support from the people around you? Obviously, you said, sounds like you're still maybe close with your parents and things like that. Were they supportive of that, and did they participate, or how did that work?
Yeah, they were very supportive. They didn't necessarily participate. My mom would go for a walk with me from time to time, but yeah, they obviously were thrilled to see me losing the weight, and they may or may not have believed it when they were watching it, but a lot of people in my life were very supportive. A lot of the guys I worked with in the warehouse, they were just like, are you losing weight? And I was like, yeah, actually I am. And so they were just, really encouraging me on. They said, that's great. And because I feel like people think that losing weight anymore has gotten so difficult, but it doesn't have to be. If you just take little steps every day, it starts to add up. But so, yeah, I got a lot of support from the people in my life, and I never had anybody discourage me or tell me, oh, that's not good. It was definitely helpful to have people support me around me. And that helps to keep you going, especially when you're hitting plateaus and things like that.
Yeah. So how long had you lost 100 pounds? So you got to 230-ish or something like that. And you started noticing you're still having significant joint pain and some other things that were going on. What were you thinking was going on at that point, and what prompted you to start I'm trying some different diets? What were you eating at the time? I guess I should put that. While you were still having all the joint pain, what was your diet looking like?
Oh, it was a whole food diet. I'd have a lean protein like chicken or pork loin or something like that, and then I'd incorporate a carb like potatoes or sometimes rice or some beans. I'd change it up, but I always had a lot of vegetables too. And I had some eggs in there and some oatmeal from time to time. So I would say it was more of like what you would everyone would call a balanced diet. It would have all the macronutrients and lots of vegetables, because I thought adding more and more vegetables would be better. And then turns out I found out not so much. But so yeah, it was basically a standard whole food diet, balanced with carbs, fats, proteins.
Yeah, clearly that was better for you, at least from a weight body composition standpoint, than eating just a standard American diet. There was some relative benefit for that, but like you're saying, you're still having symptoms. You're still having joint pain. What else? Anything else besides the joint pain?
I would recall at work, I would get really bad energy swings. I would just sometimes just in that classic middle of the afternoon fatigue would hit, and it definitely limit my ability to work. But the joint pain, the nerve impingement in my lower back when I was weightlifting would give me the radicular pains, and then I'd be battling that for a while. So then I'd be taking trips to the chiropractor. And so not to mention, I guess I'm forgetting to talk about also the bloating that would happen in the gut after you eat all those vegetables. It's not just going to go right through you. There's going to be a lot of bloating. And so I'd be dealing with a lot of gas after meals and things like that. And until I started learning more about gastrointestinal health and how that actually can affect the rest of your body. I never knew what was going on at the time. I thought it was just normal to be bloated, things like that.
Yeah, okay. And so then you went ketogenic. And so where were you at body weight wise when you went ketogenic, and what did it do for you as far as, or did you lose any weight? Did you feel better? What was the story with the ketogenic diet?
Yeah, so I lost weight. I was sitting right around where I was at right now, about 205 to 210 when I started that. And I ended up through the ketogenic diet, losing all the way down to I got close to 190 pounds, and which I thought was a feat, but I didn't like how I felt at that weight. I felt weak. I looked skinny, and I just said, this ain't sustainable, especially for a guy like me who likes to eat. And so obviously I started eating a little more and getting that weight back up. But the ketogenic diet initially did relieve some pain in my back, obviously improved energy levels, but I found a lot of those like keto products that they sell, like the keto cakes and whatnot, were actually no better than the regular cakes. They made me bloat up even worse, because I'd noticed, like, after I had some keto brownies, like my gut would just be distended like crazy. And so that triggered me to think, okay, there's something not quite right about this. But yes, there were some initial improvements on the ketogenic diet, but it didn't last forever, unfortunately.
And when you were eating a ketogenic diet, was it, again, a whole foods ketogenic diet, or did you fall prey to here's the keto brownies and the keto cupcakes and the keto desserts and fat bombs and all that stuff? And were you intentionally restricting protein down quite low?
Yeah. So it was probably about, I would say 85 to 90% whole food. And then I would use the keto brownies, keto cakes as like a treat on the weekends, or something to keep me going to satisfy that sugar craving. And so that was, it was about 90% whole food. But I didn't really get into the fat bombs. I still was eating a decent amount of protein, but not to the point to where we're at now with the carnivore diet. It was decent enough to where it wasn't like I was lacking too much in protein, but I was incorporating some nuts and seeds, a lot of olive oil, avocados, and then of course I was mixing in a lot of vegetables to help give me volume. And then, from time to time, I'd have the treat of the keto cakes sweetened with stevia, erythritol, whatever it may be. But so that kind of explains what my diet was like at that time.
Yeah, I can remember when I was doing keto, you'd eat all these sort of big salads and things like that. It was almost like doing penance. I was like, okay, I'm going to eat all this stuff so that maybe later I can have something that actually tastes good. I was just kind of like, it's like, I got to do all this stuff to keep me full, just to shove indigestible filling matter into my gut. So just to keep me in check. And maybe every once in a while I get some actual nutrition. What happened? Because you're eating all these vegetables on keto. What was going on with your joint pain at that point? Did that help? Did it help some? When you lost an additional 20 pounds or so?
It helped initially, but it didn't last. The joint pain was still coming back, and I'd still get nerve impingement occasionally in my lower back. And then I just found that a lot of it was not addressing some of the initial issues of my sugar cravings that may or may not have been addressed altogether. With the stevia and erythritol, it may not be sugar, but it's still satisfying. You like sugar, and as a result, you're still going to want to keep eating more and more. And as a result, I was getting the bloating in my gut, and then that, I believe, that was contributing a lot to the increased inflammation in my joint, my back, and yeah. So it's when you go from a standard American diet to a whole food diet. Initially, you will feel better because it's a new experience. And that's a total 180 shift. And so it was similar to that kind of change to where, yeah, I made a big change. I got rid of most carbohydrates. And so as a result, I was getting that initial acute feeling of, yeah, this feels great. And then as you keep going along with it, you start to notice, oh, this ain't feeling that great. I'm still all of a sudden getting these joint pains again. And because, yeah, it would just affect even when I'm like sitting or standing on the job. As with my job, I'm doing some lifting, having to physically assist people quite a bit. And when it's interfering with that and making me have a back pain all day, it's like, okay, this ain't working. What else are we going to do? And so if that explains that.
Yeah. So what was, I guess, the catalyst? You're down to 190, and because we see a lot of people, they go from keto and they end up carnivore. What drove you to say, this is what I want to do now? Because I'd already lost down 140 pounds. I'm clearly feeling better than you had in a while, but what was it sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, to make you decide keto wasn't right and I'm going to do carnivore now?
Yeah. Some of it was, like I said, I just happened to watch a lot of YouTube videos, and it started to show a lot of your videos about carnivore. And initially I always was like, I don't think I need to do that. But then I started actually paying attention and started watching these videos and listening to what you and Dr. Ken Berry and everyone would have to say. And it was like a curiosity. I was like Curious George. I was just like, maybe I should try it. And my friend, who's a chiropractor who was working on me, he had told me about the carnivore diet too, and how he had used it from time to time, and how it definitely helped him just decrease a lot of inflammation in his body. And so it was more just curiosity of, let's just try it. And it couldn't hurt me. So I just took a little leap of faith and started eating more meat-based and getting rid of all the vegetables, all the nuts and seeds, and getting rid of most plant foods. And I was feeling better. The joint pain was going away, which is actually funny. It was perfect timing to start the carnivore diet because at the time I had injured my knee. And I was playing sports with some friends and blew out my right knee. And so obviously, thanks to the carnivore diet, I was able to recover that very quickly. And then unluckily, I injured it again. But then within a few months, I recovered it again. And as a result, I'm noticing that the carnivore diet, when I'm strict on it, I don't have any right knee pain. And even though I've had 2 injuries within the last year, I don't have any pain in my right knee. And so it was just more the curiosity aspect. And I was just thankful to have found it. So,
yeah, I'm glad you did. I'm glad it's helping you out there. And so how long has it been now that you've been on this carnivore diet?
We're getting pretty close to a year. So you could still say I'm still somewhat of a rookie, but yeah, it's been about a year since I started. And I've lasted a year, and obviously it's sustainable. Unlike what some people want to say, it's not sustainable. You can't do it forever. I'm like, here I am a year later, and I love it. I haven't been eating as good as I am ever, and I feel better than I ever. The pain is down immensely, and I practice a lot of fasting too, and I found the carnivore has helped me to fast a lot better as well. I don't get quite as much of the immense hunger cravings you might get with fasting. And yeah, it's been a good year. It's been a good year of really just letting my body heal from all the years of doing all the standard American diet, but then also shifting into a lot of vegetables and plants that probably damaged my body to a point. And yeah, it's been a good year.
It can certainly be educational. We kind of learn about how our body works a little bit when we're in this very sort of elimination type of situation. As far as you said, mom was a farm, raised on a farm, whole food cooking. What do they think about this all meat thing? Do they think it's totally off the rails, or what do they think about that?
I talk to them about it a lot, and because I think they would both benefit from it, especially with my dad recently having basically a spinal cord injury that's impaired his mobility now. And so I've talked to them about it. I talked to them about it, and they're supportive about it. But I just don't feel like they're willing to give up their foods, the standard American diet. You can't obviously force people to go with a way of eating, but they at least listen to me. But I just don't think they're willing to give it a try just yet.
Yeah, fair enough. But they're not giving you a hard time about it. They've obviously seen the result that you have achieved, clearly you've maintained for a while. Yeah, that's the thing that people talk about, unsustainability, and yet you see people that do these diets. I'm talking about even across the board low carb diets. People say it's unsustainable. You got people that have been doing these things for decades and decades. There's carnivore people who have been doing this stuff for 2 or 3 decades, and some even longer, reportedly. You said you're in Des Moines, Iowa. What do you, that's obviously not a bad, you're in a pretty big agricultural state, but what is the diet look like for you on a day-to-day basis now? What's a regular week of food look like for you?
So typically, I'm eating about 2 meals a day. Most days I eat a big meal in the morning, which I like to change it up. I may have a steak, or I may have a pound of ground beef cooked up like a steak. I might have pork chops, pork steak. I might throw in a few pieces of bacon, and then I might have anywhere from 3 to 8 eggs with that breakfast. And then that'll last me throughout the day. And then after I get home from work, I'll usually eat about another pound of ground beef, or another pound of pork chop, or pound of steak, just depending on if I'm getting bored on pork or if I'm getting bored on beef. So I'm able to change it up. And then with that, I might have a little bit of cheese on my burger. Things I like to add. I don't like to have too much cheese, but I like to add it in just to give variety and keep the diet interesting. But that's what I eat most days. I do incorporate a little bit of liver from time to time, like maybe every few weeks I'll have some liver. I do make my own bone broth, and I like to break fast with that. And then, so I'll drink that after a fast. And then once in a while, I'll buy bone marrow and have that with a steak, or have it with a burger. I do incorporate some butter into my breakfasts sometimes, just melt a little butter over the steak or over the eggs. And so most of what my diet looks like, I do occasionally incorporate some fermented veggies in, like sauerkraut, not often, but intermittently. And of course, intermittently, once in a while, I do have fruit, not every day, but maybe like one or 2 days on the weekend, just as a treat. And I found that the fruit doesn't negatively impact me as long as it's only intermittent. So that's kind of a general picture of my current diet.
Yeah, I think that's for most people say that's pretty sustainable. A little bit of dairy, a little bit of fruit, a little bit of vegetable, mostly a bunch of meat. Are you going out of your way to consume only grass-fed products, or are you just eating grocery store meat that's grain-fed? Do you know what you're consuming typically?
I eat both. I have a local farmer that I've gotten to know, and they will sell either a quarter, half, or a whole beef, and they do pasture-raised cattle. And so I developed a good relationship with them. So I'll order a half from them, and then they send it to the locker, and I tell them how I want it processed, and then I go pick it up, and that'll last me about 4 months, and then it's time to get another one. But I do buy some grocery store meat as well, just to fill in. The pricing, as far as that goes, it's not too much cheaper than buying whole from the actual rancher, but yeah, I do incorporate both just to keep the freezer full, and just so that to also help balance the pocketbook too.
Yeah, life is good when you got a freezer full of meat. You just feel a little, it's like, I don't know what's going to happen over the next 3 months, but I got food. So that's always a good thing to say. So let me tell you, you said you work at a SNF, a skilled nursing facility. Obviously, a lot of debilitated, sick patients. I don't know what the mix is. I know we would send a lot of orthopedic patients there that were recovering from various injuries and surgeries and things like that. Changing your diet to a carnivore diet and now observing what people are eating in these institutions, has that had an impact on you? Are you saying, oh my God, what are we feeding these people? Or what are you feeding these people?
I'm glad you asked that, because that's exactly what I was thinking. As soon as I started incorporating this meat-based diet, I started making me look at all of my patients differently and be like, this can't possibly be a result. Most people we're seeing is orthopedic aftercare from a fall and a hip fracture or having a hip replacement, knee replacement. But then, of course, we have plenty of people with neurological disorders and plenty of people with dementia, Alzheimer's. And it just changed the way I looked at it. I was like, this isn't as a result of just aging. There's more to it. This is a lifetime of eating these processed foods, eating the preservatives, the things that shouldn't be going into our body, which may not initially harm us if we initially eat it one time, but a lifetime of eating this stuff repetitively. And it made me look, is this a result of doing that? And I think absolutely that's the case that's going on. People, they're losing the cartilage in their joints just because of all the inflammation that's damaging and destroying the cartilage. And then not to mention their nervous system. It's eating away the myelin sheath, and then they're losing their nervous function. And that's just the tip of the iceberg right there. So you're definitely right. It changed the way I looked at all my clients. And it was, very enlightening.
You undoubtedly, nutrition plays a role in pretty much every single aspect of health, including, I'd say every chronic disease is impacted by that. Yeah, in some cases, I think it's causative for the disease. And I don't know what capacity you work as, at the SNF there, but what are they actually feeding? Are they feeding them whole, nourishing animal foods primarily, or are they mostly like processed carbs and Ensure and garbage protein and that type of stuff? What are they feeding them over there?
This is a little bit higher end facility I'm working in. And so they do feed them some protein. It's not very much on their plate just because most people, they don't have much of an appetite, but they fill the plate up with a lot of rice, a lot of bread, a lot of pasta. So they definitely carb load the plate. They may throw a few veggies on the plate and they may serve them a side of fruit, but it's interesting though. I remember I've developed really good rapport with all my clients. And I remember one of my clients was telling me she was just disgusted by what was on her plate. She said that this is all carbs. She said there's no protein on here. I'm paying good money to be here, and they're just feeding me cheap carbs. And so, yeah, they're definitely filling up the plate with a lot of carbs, and there's very little protein, probably like 1 to 2 ounces of protein on the plate.
It was kind of like the free breakfast at the free continental breakfast at the hotel, where all they put out is the cheapest carb stuff they can give, donuts and pastries and things like that. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is good, but it's actually just the cheap stuff. And like you said, the protein is really the protein, and then to a degree, the fat is where it's at. And so they're being undernourished. It delays I'm sure it delays their healing. I know it does. We know, even if you look in the literature and not even orthopedic, this is trauma literature. When you go through a big trauma or a surgery, your protein requirements go up 10, 15% over baseline. And so if you're continuing to underfeed these people, it's just going to delay their healing process. Do you have much opportunity to talk to these people about nutrition? Is there anything like say, hey, why don't you try that? Or is that kind of out of are you maybe not allowed to talk about that or something?
Obviously, under my license, I can't make nutritional recommendations, but I can generally talk about what they're eating and just the basic stuff. Some people don't eat a lot, so I'll be like, you need to recover, so you probably should try to finish what's on your plate. But I can't get too much into specifics just because it's not within my scope of practice. But yeah, some people will talk about the nutrition, and it's just crazy to think how much people have been misled over the years, that people think, oh, I'm eating this food, I'm eating the whole grains, I'm eating the vegetables, so I should be good for me. But no, it's very limited how much I can talk about nutrition. I can't get too in depth. I can just encourage someone to eat their plate, but that's about the most I can say.
How often do they serve steak in the nursing home, or or this nursing facility rather?
It happens from time to time. I see they'll get like hamburger or something like that, but it's probably not as often as they get chicken or pork. Or I've seen in the lower end facilities I've worked in that, you almost never see beef just because they don't quite have the money. But in this facility, it's intermittent. They have roast here or there, or they may have steak bits here or there, or hamburgers, but it's not as frequent as pork or chicken.
Yeah, fair enough. When you said you wanted to be on carnivore diet for a year, has there been any negatives to your knowledge of this? Was there any down stuff that's like, this was bad for me? Was there any negatives that occurred?
I can't say there's any like huge negatives. The only negative was my thoughts in my mind going like, oh, I don't get to eat my carbs, or oh, I don't get to eat these treats that I really like on a consistent basis. So it was initially, I think the thought of giving that stuff up was a little bit hesitant, was like, oh. So there's that food addiction kicking in. But as I kept on going into it, I just found that I'm able to be pretty flexible with this diet. And even at social gatherings, I can either just choose not to eat, or I can just eat the meat on the plate, like if we go out to eat. But no, I found, initially it was more just behavioral and mental barriers at first, just not willing to give up some of the plant foods that I like to eat. And I will admit, occasionally I do have those, like once or twice a month. And you really notice while you're on a carnivore diet, the difference when you do incorporate that. All of a sudden your joint pains start coming back and your mental clarity starts to go away. And so it almost motivates you, like, okay, you see how you feel on that. It motivates you to not try to incorporate that or cheat, on the diet. It was mostly just not willing to give up the foods I loved.
Yeah, and we all like, I like dessert. If I'm like, I'm going to cheat on a carnivore diet, it's going to be dessert. It's not going to be with broccoli. I couldn't stand the stuff to start with. But when you say don't want to give up these foods, but I do anyway, what are the things that allow you not to do that? Is it just eating enough, or what is it that gives you the sort of the willpower, the strength to say, I'm not going to eat the donut or whatever it might be?
A lot of it, you said it right there, eating enough, eating to satiety. Sometimes eat to the point where you're comfortably stuffed. I've noticed that if I get to that point, then I don't get any like craving throughout the day, or I won't get any thought of wanting to eat throughout the day, because obviously you have to eat till you're stuffed. You don't want to eat anymore. But a lot of it was just practicing self-discipline, and then just focusing on how I felt when I tried to cheat and incorporate that stuff in, and just let it motivate me to say, hey, you feel like crap when you're eating crap, so don't eat crap. And so a lot of it was just practicing self-discipline and self-control there over time, and just, developing better strength in those areas.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any cardiac patients. Do you guys do any cardiac rehab there or anything like that? And are they all on carnivore diets, the people that are in there for heart disease? Is that typically what they're eating, a carnivore diet?
We get plenty of people in for cardiac rehab. We're not addressing it specifically as cardiac rehab, but they're staying skilled for having a myocardial infarction or post-stroke or things like that. And I can tell you that they don't alter the diet at all. They're eating the processed foods, the same diet everyone else is. So no one is on a carnivore diet. Yeah,
I'm just wondering if you ever talk to these heart patients and ask them what they were eating prior to their heart attack, and I'm sure none of them are going to say they're on a carnivore diet. It's fairly rare, but I think it's probably just the overabundance of highly processed junk food that everybody seems to consume. Okay, so here's another one that people will often say that I can't do the diet, it's too expensive. What did you find with regard to affordability of this diet versus any other diet?
It's funny because initially I thought that too, that it would be expensive and I wouldn't be able to afford it. And it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to eat ribeyes every day. You don't have to eat filet mignon every day. Here in Iowa, we have fairly reasonable price on meat compared to the rest of the country from what I've seen. And you can find good deals on hamburger here. Once in a while, our local store, you can buy a 10-pound tube for like $3 a pound, and you can buy a pork loin for like $1.50 a pound. And so it doesn't have to be, especially when you're not buying the fruits and vegetables as often, and you're not buying like the condiments, and you're not buying all this extra stuff that ends up adding up. You're just buying the meat and the eggs. And so it turns out actually it's not any more expensive than a regular balanced diet that I was eating in the past. It maybe even be a little bit cheaper if I'm looking after the deals right and buy in bulk. No, it's actually not unaffordable at all. It can be very affordable.
Yeah, thankfully that's the case here, at least in the US. Other countries, maybe not much. And with regard to, you said you were at 6 foot, about 210. What do you need? How much food do you need a day to keep you going?
most days I eat about 2 pounds of meat, and I can usually eat that in one sitting too, along with, if I eat 2 pounds of meat and then eat 6 eggs to go with that, I'm usually pretty stuffed. And depending on if I've been lifting that day or not, I may have that second meal, which I'll have another pound of meat. But sometimes I just listen to how hungry I am. I just try to eat till I'm satiated. It doesn't necessarily have to be 2 pounds, but some days it just happens to be 2 pounds. And so, yeah, if I go a day where I didn't go lift or go train, then I eat a little bit less. With this job, I'm on my feet all day, walking around and lifting up some of these patients. Sometimes I'm burning more calories. So then lately, yeah, you find that when you're working, you end up getting more appetite just because of how much I'm moving around. So it's about 2 to 2.5 pounds of meat a day, along with 6 to 8 eggs and a couple tablespoons of butter and maybe a serving of cheese. But
yeah, so you're probably,
general.
so like you're like 3,000 calories or so, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe a little more.
A little more, yeah.
One of the things, and you mentioned this moving patient, I remember we would have a lot of healthcare staff, nurses and nursing assistants and things like that, often complaining and getting injured from having to move these just really big patients. You're a 5'3", 140-pound nurse, and you got a 320-pound dude you got to roll around, and it was often a problem. And with your, I don't know how often you're engaged in having to move these. Obviously, there's assistive devices you use and sliding boards and whatnot, but how much is it being on Carnivore, because you said you had a lot of back pain in the past, has it facilitated your ability to do that easier?
I've always been able to do it. It's just a matter of, am I battling with annoying pain along with it, and then am I having annoying pain afterwards from doing it for a day or so. But I found being on Carnivore that I definitely don't experience that lagging pain when I get home from work of, oh, I got this nagging pain in my lower back, or pain while I'm moving someone. And generally, I found also doing this career 4 years, better ways to move people. And I found obviously it benefits them better if I try to make them do as much as they can. But yeah, I've definitely noticed, though, I don't experience the nagging pain and achiness after work each day. And also, I don't get the nagging pain in my feet sometimes either. You're on your feet all day. You can imagine sometimes your feet feel like dogs after the end of the day. Yeah, it definitely, I'm less hesitant to try to lift people now or try to assist them. And I don't have to have the afterwards results of pain.
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot of joint pain was a major issue, but did you notice, like, going from even keto to carnivore, any additional benefits either with cognitive performance, digestive health, skin health, I think you said workouts were a little better, but any other, maybe weren't a problem, but you just noticed I got better on?
Yeah, obviously going from keto to carnivore, I noticed that I put on muscle mass, of course. That would obviously be one noticeable thing that I could see visually. But then I would also say that my energy was a lot more steady when I went from keto to carnivore. Even with keto, you still have a little bit of dips throughout the day. But with carnivore, I can eat to satiety. And then as long as I got my sleep on par, it's just steady, smooth energy throughout the day. No changes. And so I will say also, because of that, I have better alertness and better concentration on carnivore, if that answers your question.
Yeah, because a lot of people, it's like when I went, I didn't think I was sick, but then I was like, oh, my digestion's a lot better than it used to be. And I was just like, there's things you just thought were normal, but they actually turned out that maybe they aren't normal and maybe you feel better. Like, I always laughed at, I don't think I've hiccuped in 7 years. And I'm just like, you're like, normally I'd hiccup. You'd have from time to time, you have the hiccups and you try to get rid of them. But I'm like, I never hiccup anymore. And not like it's a big deal, but it was just like, why am I not hiccuping anymore? I rarely ever itch. I'm never like having to itch myself, or just these kind of weird things that we're just used to, is hiccuping and obviously belching and farting all the time. And you don't do that stuff anymore because you're just not producing the gas that you would on a carnivore diet with all the fiber in there. The other question that often comes up is sodium, electrolytes, salt in your food, not salt in your food. You worry about that. How do you deal with that stuff?
Yeah, so I usually traditionally use Himalayan salt just because it has all the basic minerals that you need. But I mix in a little sea salt too from time to time. But I definitely stay away from the iodized processed salt. But I usually will salt my food heavily And that's usually enough to prevent any lightheadedness or any drowsiness throughout the day. If I am fasting, though, then I will take a pinch of salt and then drink it with my water, just as a way, because I've noticed from fasting in the past that there was a time where I was almost passing out, and I figured out, oh, it's because my salt's getting too low. So I started putting salt in my water, and I'll solve that problem. But yeah, I don't buy any of the electrolyte packages just because sometimes they get a little expensive, and you have to be careful what to watch out in those, because some of them, they're adding other things you don't want. But yeah, generally it's Himalayan salt, sea salt, just salt my food heavily, and have some salt in my water if I'm fasting.
Yeah, and I guess I should elaborate a little bit on this. When you say you're fasting, are you doing like extended 2-3 day fast, or is it just intermittent fasting throughout the day where you only eat one meal or something like that? How does that typically work for you?
Most of the time, if I fast, it'll be 1 to 2 days a week. I will just fast 24 hours. And that seems to be good enough to keep any extra inflammation down in my body. But I used to do intermittent fasting quite often, but I just found it doesn't fit my schedule anymore. And I just didn't seem to find any real crazy benefits from the intermittent fast. So I just found that the OMAD fast, the 1 meal a day fast for 24 hours was the most beneficial. And I only needed to incorporate it 1 to 2 days a week. Unless I'm really wanting to cut down some body weight, then maybe I might go 3 or 4 days for a whole week just to get some excess weight down and get started. But I just typically don't like to fast too often, because I find over time it ends up getting stressful and I can feel I get anxious. And so that's usually when I'm listening and saying, okay, you need to start eating more again. But yeah, 1 to 2 days a week of just OMAD, and that helps to a lot of things.
Yeah, fair enough. And it's certainly easier, like you mentioned. A lot of people find it easier to go long periods of time without eating on carnivore. I certainly can. If I get in a situation where I just can't eat, I'm like, okay, I'm fine. I'm not like in years past. I mean, you get on a more carb-based diet, and you're just really, and we call it hangry or whatever. You just really, you're pissed off until you can eat. And now I can very easily go 24 hours or more. I don't do it very often because I prefer to eat, but when you went keto, has your protein gone up from keto, do you think, relative to now? Did you include more protein? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, significantly. I might have been eating a pound of meat a day on keto, and now it's 2 to 2.5 pounds, maybe 3 pounds of meat a day, some days on carnivore. And yeah, that's obviously a result of how some of my weight went up. But a lot of that nutrition obviously was putting in the right weight. I was putting on density of muscle, and probably also helping to dense up some of my tendons and ligaments as well. But yeah, no, it's definitely far more protein today now than I was on keto.
Yeah, and it's also, we think about protein as muscle, but it's bone mineral density, it's skin, it's all of our internal organs. There's so many different things that go into that. That's very important to do. What about, are you like on social media or anything like that? It's a two-edged sword. I'm on there. I have to be at this point, and there's some definite good to it, but there's some downsides to it. But are you on social media at all with this stuff?
Yeah, I have expressed my frustration with some of the misconceptions that have been relayed in the mass media over the years about red meat's going to be bad for you, cholesterol is bad for you, eggs are bad for you. And I don't post too often on social media just because I find that there's just so much garbage on it that it's best if I just stay off, and I feel better when I'm off of it. But occasionally I do feel that I need to inform people of the misconception about meat and cholesterol and saturated fat. So I'll post here or there. I also I got the carnivore and fasting certification on your Revero platform. And so I shared my platform as well to all my friends and said, hey, if you're looking to make a serious change in your diet, why don't you go ahead and get a hold of me and see if I can answer any questions. And so, yeah, but generally though, a lot of my life, I try to stay off social media.
Yeah, typically, I don't know what the situation is at the skilled nursing facility you're at, but usually there's like a rehab doc or a primary care doc that kind of cruises through and checks on the patients once a day and things like that. Do you ever interact with those guys, and do they have any sort of thoughts on nutrition, or is it just like most of them don't even think nutrition has any role in any of this stuff?
Yeah, we have a doctor for our facility. He comes in once a week, and his PA comes in once a week, and to just check up on our patients, mostly the skilled patients. And I never really have to interact with them. I interact with my supervising therapist, and he interacts more with the doctor and PA. But we've never talked about nutrition to the doctors or anything like that. But obviously, all my colleagues know that I practice the carnivore diet, and no one's shamed me or said, "Oh, that's going to be bad for you." No, they're all actually interested. They're curious, like, "Huh." Like they're like, I never thought of it that way. So they, of course, are supportive of me doing it. And I think I've piqued their curiosity as well.
Yeah, that's got to help. And I guess the other question, because you said you do a lot of OMAD, 24-hour fast and things like that. How often do you have to eat at work? And what do you do when you're at work? Do you just pop out a big old steak and start munching on that? Or what do you do?
No, I don't eat at work usually. I found that it's just best if I don't bring food to work and I just work throughout the day. Then I don't have to take a lunch break. And so I get done sooner and I just eat when I get home. But it helps when I eat a pretty big meal in the morning after I get done with my workout. I eat that 1 to 2 pounds of meat with some eggs. And you find you don't need to eat after that, not for a long while, just depending on how much I'm moving around. And there may be some days where, I don't eat anything in the morning and then I won't eat anything at all at work. So it's very rare to see me eating at work, and usually I don't need to.
Yeah, fair enough. And it's interesting because you think about it, I wonder how much time inefficiency in the world would be if people didn't need to take their 90-minute lunch break and then they have their post-lunch slump, and because you're just more efficient. We probably could up the productivity of business by 20% or something like that. I'll tell you what, Josh, we're just about out of time. Maybe if you're willing to share your social media sites, if there's anybody interested that wants to follow you or hook up a coaching session or something like that, let folks know how to do that.
My social media platform obviously is, you can just look up my name, Josh Clunker, and you can send me a message on there and I'd be happy to direct you a link to my coaching platform.
Okay, perfect. So Josh Clunker. All right, Josh. Thanks for being here. Appreciate doing what you're doing and sharing the word. And hopefully this will inspire some people. Maybe you can get the nursing home to start feeding them a few more steaks. I know there was a dude that was turning 101. He was a World War II vet, and I didn't know the guy. Somebody posted on social media. So I literally went to this, it was near me. So I drove out to the nursing home and brought this old guy a steak. I said, thanks for doing what you did during World War I. He was super happy guy, but he's a little bit demented. I'm not sure if he totally got it, but it was an interesting thing to give this. He probably hadn't had a steak in probably decades, I'm guessing. But anyway, all right, Josh, good meeting you, man. Thanks. Appreciate it. Everybody else, we'll see you guys tomorrow if you guys be here on the weekend. So take care, everybody. Take care, guys. Bye-bye. Hey, folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. If you guys are enjoying these success stories, you can become your own success story. You can do that by heading over to CarnivoreDiet. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial and get started today. We're looking forward to supporting you. Our community is wonderful, and we'd love to see your success.